Every Sunday for 5 years, Imani Brooks bought a single yellow chrysanthemum for $1.75 at the corner store on Good Hope Road and carried it 3/4 of a mile to a grave that belonged to no one she was related to. She wiped the dirt out of the carved letters with her thumb and sat on the grass for 11 minutes, talking to a man who could not answer. The stone read Walter J. Banks, 1949 to 2021. 4 words and 2 dates, the cheapest line the county sold, because no one had ever paid for more. Imani did not know that the dead man's own daughter now had her name on a brass plate 3 floors above the office. Imani mopped 4 nights a week, or that in 34 days a letter in a steel tray on that floor would decide whether Walter Banks kept his 6 feet of ground at all. What Imani did with that letter would either give a forgotten man his name back, or cost a powerful woman the one thing she had spent 2 terms pretending she'd never had. Imani Brooks was 54 years old, and she had cleaned other people's buildings for 31 of them. She started at 19, mopping a department store off Pennsylvania Avenue for $4.25 an hour, and she had never once in 3 decades worked a job that paid in daylight. The world she knew was the world after the lights went off. Empty hallways, vacuum cords, the hum of a soda machine in a break room, where, 3 hours earlier, people with salaries had laughed about things she would never hear the end of. She lived in a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a brick walk-up off Stanton Road, in Anacostia, in the southeast corner of the city most of the postcards left out. Rent was $1,140 a month. She made it work the way her people had always made it work, which is to say by counting. Imani counted everything. She knew the bus came at 9:52 p.m., and that if she missed it the next one was 10:31, and that 10:31 meant she clocked in 2 minutes late, and that 2 minutes late 4 times was a write-up. She knew a gallon of milk had gone from $2.80 to $4.15 in 3 years. She knew that the yellow chrysanthemum at the corner store was $1.75, and that the same flower 4 blocks north where the new coffee shop had opened was $6 and called a single stem. She bought the $1.75 one. She was not ashamed of it. Her mother had taught her that there was no shame in a thing that cost what it cost. Her mother, Ruthie Brooks, had come up from Halifax County, North Carolina in 1961 with a cardboard suitcase and a dress sewn into the lining of her coat in case she got lost. Ruthie had cleaned houses in Northwest until her knees gave out at 68, and she raised Imani and Imani's 2 brothers in 3 rooms with a cast-iron skillet that was older than all of them and a Bible so worn the cover had gone soft as cloth. On Sunday morning she put all 3 children in the one good outfit each of them owned and walked them to Pilgrim Rest Baptist on W Street, where they sang until the windows shook, and afterward there was sweet potato pie if it had been a good week and just the singing if it had not. Ruthie used to say 2 things. She said them so often that Imani could hear them in her sleep, in the exact pitch of her mother's voice, even now, 11 years after they had put Ruthie in the ground out at Lincoln Memorial. The first thing Ruthie said was, "You don't owe nobody an explanation for surviving." The second thing she said, and she said it every single time they passed a cemetery, every time without fail, was, "The dead can't tend to themselves, baby. That's why the Lord went and left us hands." Imani had not understood that second one for most of her life. She understood it now. Her shift at Cedarbrook Senior Living started at 11 p.m. and ended at 7:14 in the morning, when the day staff finally finished counting the med cart. Cedarbrook was not the kind of place with a fountain in the lobby. It was a flat tan building on Alabama Avenue with 81 beds, a parking lot that flooded every time it rained hard, and a staff-to-resident ratio that the inspectors wrote up twice a year and that nobody ever fixed. Imani was technically a cleaner. She was paid $11.40 an hour to mop the linoleum, empty the bins, and run the floor buffer down a hallway that smelled like bleach over something the bleach could not quite cover. But she did more than they paid her for, she always had. She did it because of a thing nobody at Cedarbrook knew, which was that, on the nights when the aides were down to 2 for 81 beds and the call buttons started blinking like a switchboard, Imani would set the mop against the wall and go answer them. She knew she was supposed to. She wasn't trained, wasn't certified, wasn't insured for it. She did it anyway. She turned people who needed turning so they wouldn't get the sores. She held cups of water to mouths that had forgotten how to ask. She sat when there was a minute, with the ones who got scared at 3 a.m., which is the hour when the old and the dying are loneliest, because the hour when the body knows things the daylight lets you forget. She never wrote it in a log. There was no box on the timesheet for it. She did not tell anyone. She did not tell her brothers when they called. She did not tell the pastor when he asked how the Lord was using her. She figured the using was the answer and the talking about it would only get in the way. That is how she met Walter Banks. Walter came to Cedarbrook in the fall of 2020. Bed 19. A man of 71 with a bad heart and a worse temper, and a folder of paperwork that listed under emergency contact and under next of kin and under every other line where a human name was supposed to go, the same flat word, none. He had been a sanitation worker for the city for 33 years. Imani knew this because Walter told her, the first night and most nights after, in the proud, stubborn, half-singing way old Carolina men have of talking, the consonants soft, the sentences long. I drove a packer truck on the east side near about half my life, he told her. Folks act like it ain't nothing. Let the trash sit 1 week. Then come tell me it ain't nothing. He had hands like cracked leather and a watch he would not take off even for the x-rays, a Timex with a band held together by a twist of copper wire, a watch he said his wife had given him in 1979, and that he had worn every day for 41 years. His wife was dead. He said her name was Coretta, and he said it the way some men say a prayer, fast, like if he slowed down it would cost him something. He did not say much about anyone else. There was a daughter. He'd that much slip one night around 2 a.m. when the morphine had loosened the hinges a little. Got a daughter somewhere, he said, looking at the ceiling. Smart, Lord, that girl was smart. Smarter than her daddy by the time she was 12. And then his jaw set and he said in the flat voice of a man closing a door, "We don't talk." Imani did not ask. That was the other thing her mother had taught her. You don't go digging in a man's quiet. If he wants to give it to you, he'll give it to you. Walter gave her small things. He taught her the right way to season collard greens, which he insisted was with a smoked turkey neck, and not the ham hock everybody used, and they argued about it for 3 nights running until the night nurse told them both to hush. He told her about the church choir he sang spass in, 50 years back, at a sanctuary in North Carolina that had a bell you could hear 2 miles down the river. He told her that the worst thing in this world was not being poor. Poor I can do, he said. Done it my whole life. The worst thing is being someplace and ain't nobody know you there. By December the doctors had a number for what was wrong with Walter's heart, an ejection fraction in the low 20s, and Walter had a number of his own, which was the number of days until Christmas, 23. And he said he intended to make it, and he did. He spent most of those 23 days in bed 19 with the rails up. On the good evenings, the ones where the swelling went down and he could breathe lying flat, he asked Imani to crack the window 2 inches, even though it was 38 degrees outside, because he said the room smelled like a place people came to leave, and he wanted 1 minute of air that smelled like the world. She cracked it 2 inches. She brought him an extra blanket from the linen closet she was not supposed to open. One night near the end he sang very low, a few bars of something in a bass gone thin and reedy, a hymn she half knew, and then he stopped and looked embarrassed and said his old choir director back home would have put him out the loft for singing it that flat. Imani told him it sounded fine. It did not sound fine. It sounded like a man practicing for a sanctuary he was not sure would have him. She did not say that either. He said that in November. He died the following March on a Tuesday at 4:47 in the morning, with his Timex still on his wrist and Imani's hand around his other hand, because she had seen the change in his breathing at 4:30 and she had not left. Nobody came. The funeral home held the body the legal 3 days and then a few more while a clerk somewhere tried the dead phone numbers in the folder. On the 4th day a county social worker signed a form, and on the 11th day they put Walter Banks in the section of the cemetery the staff called, when no families were around to hear it, the county field. Plot 4C, a flat stone the size of a license plate, 4 words and 2 dates. Imani went on her lunch break, in her uniform, and she stood at the edge of the open ground for the few minutes it took, and she was the only living person there who had ever heard the man's voice. She thought about her mother on the walk back. She thought, the dead can't tend to themselves. She started going the next Sunday. She has not missed one in 261 weeks. This is the part people get wrong when they hear it later. They think it was grief. It was not grief exactly. Imani had grieved her mother and she knew what grief felt like, the way it sits on your chest like a wet coat. This was different. This was closer to a job, the only kind of job Imani had ever known how to do, which was the kind nobody saw and nobody paid for and somebody had to. So every Sunday after early service at Pilgrim Rest, she changed out of her good shoes into the white sneakers she kept by the door, the ones with the left sole worn down to the fabric on the outside edge from 30 years of pushing a mop. She walked to the corner store. She bought the chrysanthemum. She walked the 3/4 of a mile. She wiped the letters. She set down the flower. She sat for 11 minutes. And she did one more thing, a thing she had started in the 2nd year and could not have told you why, except that it felt like the kind of thing Walter would have growled at and secretly liked. She wrote on a small card a single line of scripture in her careful hand, and she folded it twice and slid it under the bottom right corner of the stone, where the grounds had settled and left a gap just wide enough. Some weeks it was Psalm 27. Some weeks it was a line she only half remembered. One week the milk hit 4:15, and she'd had to choose between the flour and the electric bill, and chosen the flour, and sat in the dark 2 nights. She wrote, "He hath not despised nor abhorred the affliction of the afflicted." She didn't know if she'd gotten the words exactly right. She slid it under the stone anyway. In 261 Sundays, she had slid 261 cards under that stone, and not one of them had ever been read by another living soul. She did not know that this was about to change. She did not know that 4 miles away, in a building she had cleaned the carpets of 100 times without ever once being seen by the woman who worked there, a daughter was about to learn that her father had been dead for 5 years. Because here is the thing about Gloria Banks. She had come up the exact same way. Gloria was born in 1974 in a row house on the same side of the river, 11 blocks from where Imani lived now. Banks, the sanitation worker, and Coretta Banks, who took in laundry and pressed white people's church dresses for $2 apiece. She was, as her father said, smart, the way that scares a poor family a little, because it means the child is going to leave. She read every book in the branch library on Good Hope Road by the time she was 13. She skipped the 8th grade. She got a scholarship to a school across town, where she was one of 9 black students in a class of 340, and she learned, fast, the thing that every kid in that position learns, which is that you have to leave 2 people behind to make it, the one you were and the ones who made you. She did both. She changed how she talked. She practiced in the mirror, flattening out the Carolina her father had handed her, because she had watched a debate coach's face do a small thing when she said, "on account of," instead of "because," and she never made that face happen again. She got the law degree. She got the legislative aide job, then the chief of staff job, then the run for the open seat that everybody said she'd lose and she didn't. She got disciplined. People used that word about her like it was a compliment, and she let them. Discipline was just a polite name for the wall, and Gloria had built the wall a long time ago, brick by brick, starting the year she was 19, and her father said the thing he said. The thing he said was about a job she'd taken. A summer fellowship with a firm that did work she would later understand was the work that hollowed out neighborhoods like the one she grew up in. She was 19. She didn't know yet. She came home proud, in a $40 blazer she'd bought at the outlet, and she told her father, and Walter Banks set down his fork and looked at his daughter for a long moment and said, quiet, "So you gonna go up there and help them do to us what they've been trying to do my whole life?" It was not a question. Gloria had been waiting her whole life for him to be proud of her, and instead he was ashamed of her. And at 19 you do not have the tools to hold both of those at once, so she chose the only thing she had, which was the wall. She told him he didn't understand anything. She told him he'd driven a garbage truck for 30 years and he was going to lecture her about the world. She said the worst thing, the thing she would replay at 3 a.m. for the rest of her life. She said, "I am not going to end up like you." Her mother died 8 years later, in 2003. Gloria came to the funeral. She and her father stood on opposite sides of the grave and did not speak. After that there was a Christmas card or two. Then nothing, then a phone number that changed, then a wall so high and so old that Gloria had stopped, somewhere in her 40s, even thinking of it as a wall. It was just the shape of her life. Some people had fathers. She had a closed door, and she had made a kind of peace with the door. And the peace had a sentence she said to herself, and sometimes, late, to a young staffer who'd lost a parent and didn't know how to grieve. "You don't owe the past anything," Senator Gloria Banks would say. "The past is just rent you already paid. Pay it once. Don't pay it twice." You could see the discipline in everything she did. She arrived at the office at 6:40 every morning before her staff and read 3 newspapers and a briefing binder before the first meeting. She kept her remarks to the time allotted, to the second. A junior member once watched her cut a sentence in half mid-clause because the clock hit her 90 seconds, and told the story for a year. She did not keep photographs on her desk. Most members kept photographs, children, a spouse, a grinning shot from some ribbon cutting. But Senator Banks kept one object on the corner of hers, a small brass scale, the kind that balances. A gift from a law professor she had never thanked properly and now never could. People read all sorts of things into the scale. None of them guessed the truth, which was that Gloria liked it because it did one thing and did it without feeling, and she found that restful. She was 51. She had not cried in front of another living person since 2003, at her mother's funeral, and even then she had done it for under a minute, with her back to her father, before she put the wall up again and drove home alone. She believed it. She had built 2 terms and a reputation on it. She did not know it was about to cost her everything she'd been protecting, because the past had kept paying every Sunday, $1.75 at a time. The 2 of them lived 4 miles apart, and they had, the actuaries of coincidence being what they are, occupied the same physical space more than once. Gloria's district office, the one she used for constituent work, was in a building on Martin Luther King Avenue, and Imani's overnight company held the cleaning contract for the third and fourth floors, and so on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday nights, Imani Brooks ran a floor buffer past the frosted glass door with the brass plate, the one that said Banks, and she had never once read the name on it, because the name on it meant nothing to her, and because at 2 a.m. you are not reading nameplates, you are watching the clock and the cord and your own 2 feet. 3 floors apart, on a Thursday in March, they did 2 things that were part of the same long chain, and neither of them knew it. On the 3rd floor, in the office, a young scheduling aide named Devin opened the constituent mail at 4 p.m. and pulled a letter from the District Department of Cemeteries, a formed letter, the kind that goes out by the hundred. It said that Mount Olivet's eastern section, where unclaimed and county-entered remains had been placed between 2018 and 2022, was scheduled for relocation to make room for a road widening project, and that any party with a legal interest in the remains of one Walter J. Banks, Plot 4C, had 45 days to come forward, or the remains would be moved to a common interment ground with no individual marker. The letter had been sent to the last address of record, which had bounced, and then forwarded by a diligent clerk to the office of the senator who shared the surname. On the off chance, the clerk had written by hand at the bottom that there might be a relation. Devin read the name. Devin did not know the senator's father's name. Almost nobody did. She never spoke of him, so Devin, 23 and overworked and 40 letters behind, set it in the steel tray marked non-urgent, where it would sit for 11 days. And on the 4th floor, 6 hours later, at 10:40 that same night, Imani Brooks buffed the hallway outside that office, and did not know that a piece of paper carrying both of their names was sitting in the dark on the other side of a wall she had cleaned 100 times. She finished at 7:14. She caught the 7:31 bus. She slept until 2, and on Sunday she got up and she went to early service and she changed her shoes and she bought the flour. But this Sunday, for the first time in 261 weeks, there was something at the grave that she had not put there. A surveyor's stake. Bright orange plastic, driven into the ground a foot from the stone, with a strip of orange tape tied to the top, snapping a little in the wind off the river, and stapled to a board at the end of the row, a notice in a plastic sleeve, the kind they post when they are about to do a thing to a place and want to be able to say later that they told you. Imani read it twice. She read it a 3rd time, standing very still, the chrysanthemum still in her hand, the cellophane sweating in the cold. She read the words relocation and common interment ground, and no individual marker. She read the words 45 days and she did the math, because Imani always did the math, and the math said the 45 days had started 11 days ago, on a date printed at the top, which meant there were 34 left, which that on a Tuesday 5 weeks out, a machine was going to come and take Walter Banks out of the only piece of ground in the world that had his name on it and put him somewhere that did not. She stood there for 90 seconds without moving. She would remember it later as the longest she had ever stood still in her life. The wind moved the orange tape. A bird she couldn't see called twice from the cypress at the back of the field. Somewhere on the road a bus hissed its brakes. And Imani Brooks, who had never in 54 years asked a single soul for a single thing, who had been raised by a woman who said you don't owe nobody an explanation for surviving, understood that she was going to have to do the one thing she did not know how to do. She was going to have to ask. She knelt down. She set the flower against the stone the way she always did. She wiped the letters with her thumb, the W and the J and the B, and she slid that week's card under the bottom right corner where the ground had settled. That week the card said only 4 words in her careful hand. I'm working on it. The next morning, instead of sleeping, she rode the 952 downtown to the district office that had sent the notice, the one whose address she had copied off the board in pencil on the back of her hand. She had not taken a personal day in 4 years. She wore her good shoes. The woman at the counter was not unkind. That was the part Imani would turn over later on the bus home. The woman was not unkind at all. She was 30-something, tired, with a lanyard and a stack of the same plastic sleeve notices Imani had read at the grave, and she listened to the whole thing, the 5 years and the Sundays and the man in bed 19 with nobody, and at the end she did a small sorry thing with her mouth and slid a pamphlet across the counter and explained the rule. Only a legal next of kin could halt a relocation. A spouse, a child, a sibling, a grandchild, somebody with a documentable relation and a notarized form, a friend, could not do it. A caregiver could not do it. I'm sorry, the woman said, and she sounded like she partly meant it, but you're not family, you understand. Imani understood. She understood it the way she understood the bus schedule and the price of a gallon of milk, as a fact of the world that did not bend because you needed it to. She did not raise her voice. She had been raised by Ruthie Brooks, who pressed other people's church dresses for $2 apiece and never once let any of them see her small. And Imani had her mother's spine if she had nothing else in this world. She said thank you. She picked up the pamphlet so the woman would not feel bad about the pamphlet. She walked out into the cold with her good shoes clicking on the marble floor, and in the lobby, under a painted mural of the river, she stopped. She stood perfectly still for the better part of a minute. 30 seconds, then 40. A woman in her good shoes holding a pamphlet she would never read, while people with badges flowed around her like she was a column holding up the ceiling. Nobody saw her. Nobody ever saw her. That was, it occurred to her, standing there, the whole problem, and had been from the start. Walter had said it himself in November in the dark, around 2 a.m. The worst thing is being someplace and ain't nobody know you there. She needed family, a child, a sibling, a grandchild, somebody with the man's blood and a notarized form. And the folder at Cedarbrook had said, under every line where if I was supposed to go, the same flat word, none. But there had been a daughter. He had let that much slip once, at 2 a.m., with the morphine loosening the hinges. Smart, he had said. Smarter than her daddy by the time she was 12. A daughter somewhere in this city or out of it, a daughter who did not know or did not care that her father was now 33 days from being lifted out of the only ground that carried his name. Imani decided on that marble floor under the painted river that she was going to find her. She had never in 54 years gone looking for anybody. She did not know the first thing about how. She started anyway, because the dead can't tend to themselves and because the Lord her mother had promised her had left her hands. She did not yet know whose name was on the door. 3 floors below the hallway, she buffed at midnight. She did not know that the woman who could stop the machine with one phone call was the same woman who had told a 19-year-old version of herself that she would not end up like her father, and who had spent 32 years making sure of it, and who had no idea, none at all, that her father was about to be taken out of the ground a second time. But the chain was already moving. The letter was in the tray. The card was under the stone, and 11 blocks and 4 miles and 20 years of silence were about to close to nothing at all. The letter surfaced on a Wednesday 12 days after it landed in the tray. It surfaced because of a coincidence so thin that Gloria would spend the next year unable to decide whether to thank God for it, or curse how nearly it had not happened at all. A communications staffer running a routine name flag for press mentions caught the surname on a district cemetery form, did not know any better, and set it on top of Devon's pile with a sticky note, same as yours. Relative? Devon, who had let the thing sit 11 days, finally carried it in at 9:10 that night, already half out the door, apologizing, and laid it on the senator's desk beside the brass scale. Gloria read it after everyone had gone home. She read the name first, Walter J. Banks. She read 1949 to 2021. And she understood in the clean, cold way she understood everything, that her father had been dead for 5 years, that nobody had told her, and that nobody had told her because she had spent 20 years making certain there was no one left who would. She sat with it for a long time. The building emptied around her. The cleaning crew came up to the 4th floor at 11 p.m., ran a buffer down the hall outside her door, and went away again, and she did not hear it, because for the first time in 2 terms, Senator Gloria Banks was not working. She did a thing that night she had not done in years, which was drive herself. No stuff, no schedule, no one told. She got the address off the form, Plot 4C, Eastern Section, Mount Olivet, and she drove across the river at midnight with the radio off, and the gate was chained, and she stood at the chain in a coat that cost more than the headstone until a flashlight came bobbing up the dark of the lane. The man holding it was 60-some, gray at the temples, in a city coverall with Stunton stitched over the pocket. He had worked the grounds 31 years. He did not recognize her, and she was grateful for that, the way you are grateful for a stranger on a train, the only kind of person you can tell the truth to, because they will get off at the next stop and take it with them, and you will never have to see your own shame in their face again. I'm here for Banks, she said. Walter Banksy. Sutton looked at her a moment. Then he unlocked the chain and let her in and walked her up the lane with the flashlight, not talking, and stopped at a flat gray stones the size of a license plate and stepped back to give her the room. And Gloria Banks, who had not knelt to anything in 30 years, went down on both knees in the wet March grass in front of her father, and the wall she had built brick by brick starting at 19 did not come down all at once. It came down the way old walls actually come down, one stone, then the one under it, then a whole section sliding. I told him I wasn't going to end up like him, she said. She was not talking to Sutton exactly, but Sutton was there, so. I was 19. He said something true and I couldn't hold it, so I said the worst thing I could think of, and then I just kept not calling. You tell yourself there's time. You tell yourself you'll do it when you're less angry. And then it's 20 years, and you've got 2 terms and a wall in the paper, and your daddy's been in the ground 5 years and a clerk has to mail you a form to tell you. Sutton did not tell her it was all right. He did not tell her time heals, or that her father would have understood, or any of the things people say to fill a silence they cannot stand. He had buried a long time. He knew the silence was the only honest thing in the place. He let it sit. Gloria stayed on her knees. She had not let herself think about the last time she saw him in so long that the memory came back out of order, in pieces. Her mother's funeral, October of 2003. She had flown in the morning of and out the same night, 4 hours on the ground, and she had stood on the far side of the open grave from her father with the whole width of Gloria Banks between them, and he had looked at her once, across the hole in the ground, an old man already by then, and she had looked at her shoes. Neither of them crossed. She had told herself on the plane home that he could have crossed too, that it was not only on her, and she had been telling herself that for 23 years, and it had held up fine right until tonight, when a man Sutton with a flashlight refused to argue with her about it, and the thing just quietly came apart in her hands. Then he said the thing that changed everything. "You're not the first one come for him," Sutton said. Gloria looked up. "Lady comes every Sunday," he said. 5 years now, near about. Brings a yellow flower, wipes the stone off, sits a while, slides a little card up under that bottom corner there every week, regular as church. He nodded at the stone. "Never seen her miss. Rain, that ice storm 2 winters back, the one shut, the city 4 days, she come. Don't know her name. Never asked. Wasn't my business." He hesitated, then went on. "The cards, though. Ground heaves in the winter, pushes some of 'em loose and they'd blow around, and I couldn't bring myself to just rake up scripture and throw it out, so I've been keeping 'em. In a can, in the shed." He scratched the back of his neck, a little embarrassed, the way Waltersley used to get embarrassed. Didn't know what else to do with 'em. He went and got the can. It was a coffee can, the big kind, and it was most of the way full. Gloria sat on the wet ground under Sutton's flashlight and took the cards out one at a time. Index cards, mostly, a few cut from cereal boxes when the index cards ran out. The same hand on everyone, careful, slow, the hand of a woman who had not been let finish school. Psalm 27, Psalm 23, a line about the afflicted she half recognized. One that just said in that careful hand, "Cold today. Brought you the marigold instead, the yellow ones were done." She read 40 of them, 50. She lost count, which she never did. She read a card that said, "Sang at church today." You'd have fussed at the choir, they was flat, and she made a sound she did not recognize as her own. There was one with no scripture on it at all, just a date from the 2nd year and the words, "They almost took your spot today, some paperwork. I sat in a office 4 hours and got it fixed, you stay put now." There was ones that said, "Brought Kamari, he's getting big, he wanted to know was you nice." I told him yes. There was one near the bottom, the cardboard gone soft from a season in the dirt, that said only, "Still here's, still here." Gloria read those 2 words a dozen times. Her father had spent the last of his life certain that nobody knew he was there. It was the thing he had feared above being poor. He had said as much to a cleaner at 2 in the morning, and a cleaner had answered it every single week on a cereal box card for free, while his own daughter built a wall in the newspapers. Still here. It was the cheapest card in the can, and it was worth more than everything balanced on the desk 4 miles away. She stayed perfectly still then for a long time, a minute, 2. She did not look at her watch, the watch she set her whole life by, because for once in 51 years there was nothing in the world she needed to be on time for. Somewhere out past the cypress a truck changed gears on the avenue, the flashlight hummed, and Senator Gloria Banks held a coffee can full of a stranger's prayers for her father and understood the size of what she had let happen. Her whole life she had told herself one sentence: "You don't owe the past anything. The past is just rent you already paid." She had paid it once, she'd told herself that minute at her mother's funeral with her back turned, and once was enough, and a disciplined person does not pay twice. And here in her 2 hands were 5 years of somebody else paying it, every week, $1.75 at a time, for a man who was not even hers. That was when she finally cried, and it was not the careful under-a-minute crying she had done in 2003 with her spine straight. It came up out of her from a place she had bricked over so long ago she had forgotten there was a room down there at all. She put her face down toward the flat gray stone, in the wet grass, in her good coat, and she wept the way grief actually sounds when nobody is performing it, ugly and quiet and from the gut, and Sutton turned the flashlight a few degrees off her, toward the cypress to give a senator the only privacy he had to give, which was the dark. She made one phone call the next morning at 7:40 before her first meeting. It is a small thing, halting a relocation, when you are the right person. The same rule that had turned Imani away at the marble counter turned the other direction now. A legal next of kin, with a documentable relation and a notarized form, could stop the machine cold, and Gloria was a lawyer and a senator, and she had both halves of her father in her, the stubbornness and the speed. So the notarized form was done by 11, and the eastern section was off the relocation list by the close of business, and Walter Banks was going to keep his 6 feet of ground. But that was the small part, and she knew it was the small part, and it sat wrong with her the whole drive home that the easy thing, the phone call thing, was the part she could do. When the woman with the coffee can had done the hard thing every Sunday for 5 years and had asked no one for anything. She wanted to find her. The cards were not signed. Sutton had never gotten a name, so Gloria did what she was good at, which was follow a thread. The flower was a corner store flower, $1.75 kind, not a florist's. The grave was the grave of a man who had died at a facility called Cedarbrook on Alabama Avenue, and a woman who tended a grave that, faithful for 5 years, had most likely known the man alive. She made 2 calls. The second one, to a tired administrator at Cedarbrook who pulled the 2021 file, gave her a single line in a discharge note that no one had ever thought twice about. Present at time of death, the note read, Overnight Environmental Services Staff I. Brooks. Environmental Services. A cleaner. The man had died with nobody, the family folder said. But the man had not died with nobody, because the cleaner had been holding his hand at 4:47 in the morning and had been holding the rest of him every Sunday since. Gloria did not send a car. She did not send a check in an envelope, though God knows the disciplined part of her, the part that liked things that balanced, wanted to make it even with a number and be done. She went herself on a Sunday, and she waited at the grave. Imani came up the lane at the usual hour, after early service, in the white sneakers with the worn-through left sole, holding a yellow chrysanthemum in sweating cellophane, and this Sunday she was not alone, because her brother Theo had a shift, and so she had her grandnephew Kamari, who was 7, in a puffy coat 2 sizes too big, holding her free hand and asking, as he asked every Sunday she brought him, why they came to see a man who wasn't even kin. Imani saw the woman standing by the stone and slowed. She did not know her. A tall woman in a dark coat, the kind of coat that did not come from anywhere, Imani shopped, standing at Walter's grave like she belonged there, which nobody ever did but Imani. Can I help you? Imani said, careful, the way you are careful with anything you have been quietly guarding for 5 years. Are you Imani Brooks? The woman said, and her voice did a thing in the middle of the name. I am. You knew Walter Banks. I did. And then, because the woman's face was doing something Imani had seen on 1,000 faces at 3 a.m. at Cedarbrook, the face of a person standing at the edge of a grief they have been outrunning, Imani softened and said, I was with him at the end. He was a good man. Stubborn as a mule about collard greens, but a good man. You knew him? The woman did not answer right away. Then she said, I'm his daughter. Imani stood very still. 5 years. 5 years she had carried a flower to this stone because no daughter came, no son, no one. And here was the daughter, in a coat worth more than Imani's car, standing in the grass. I've been trying to find you, Imani said finally, and it came out quieter than she meant it. For about a month now, the county was going to move him. I didn't know how. I'm not family, see, so they couldn't tell me anything and I couldn't stop it. And I've been calling churches in North Carolina off a thing he told me once, trying to find his people, trying to find you. I about gave up. She looked at the woman, really looked. Where you been? It was not cruel. That was what undid Gloria. There was no knife in it. The woman was not accusing her. The woman just wanted to know, the way Kamari wanted to know, with her whole open face, where the daughter had been. I was 4 miles away, Gloria said. I've been 4 miles away the whole time. And then, because she could not stand inside the lie of omission one more second in front of this woman, my name is Gloria Banks. I'm a United States Senator. My office is on Martin Luther King Avenue, 3rd floor. I believe you clean it. Imani's mouth opened and closed, the brass plate. Banks, the frosted glass she had buffed past 100 times at 2 in the morning. The name that had meant nothing, that had been just another word on just another door in just another building she was paid to be invisible inside of. Lord, Imani said softly, I've been mopping your hallway. You've been doing a great deal more than that, Gloria said. Kamari, 7 years old, looked up at the tall, crying stranger, and then at his great-aunt, and asked the question that children ask, the one that walks straight through the middle of a thing the grown people are going around. Auntie, is she the one who was supposed to come? Imani put her hand on the boy's head. Hush now, baby. You always say somebody was supposed to come and didn't, Kamari said, reasonable. So you come instead. Is she the somebody? For a moment nobody said anything at all. Then Gloria knelt down in the grass again, this time to be level with the 7-year-old, and said, yeah, baby, I'm the somebody. So I'm sorry I was late. Gloria told her about the letter then, and the tray, and the 11 days it had sat, and how close it had come to never surfacing at all. She told her the relocation was off, that her father would keep his ground, that she had signed the form herself at 11 o'clock on a Thursday morning, the same kind of form a tired woman at a marble counter had told Imani only family could sign. You did it, Imani said, and there was no resentment in it. only the tired relief of a person setting down a thing she had carried alone for a month. I tried for weeks. They wouldn't let me. I'm not family, see? You're more family than I was, Gloria said. Imani shook her head at that. I'm not trying to take nothing from you, she said. A man can have more than one person love him. There's no shortage of that. That's the one thing in this world there's never a shortage of. People just act like there is. Gloria offered her money first. She could not help it. It was the language she had taught herself, the one that balanced. She named a number, a serious number, the kind that changes a life, and she watched it land on Imani Brooks and bounce off like rain off a good coat. I don't take what I haven't earned, Imani said. And Gloria went cold all over, because that was her father's sentence, word for word. The exact words Walter Banks had used the night he turned down the money. Gloria mailed him in 2004, the words on the return check she still had in a drawer she never opened. This woman had spent enough Sundays with him that his sentences had gotten into her, the way a song gets into you, and she said them now without knowing she was handing the daughter back a piece of her own father. I'm not offering you a handout, Gloria said when she could talk again. I would never insult you with a handout. I'm offering you work, real work with a real wage, the kind you have more than earned and never once been paid for. She took a breath. I want to build something. I don't know exactly what yet, but it has my father's name on it, and it does the thing you've been doing for free, and I want you to run it, because there is not one soul in this city who knows how to do it better than you. Imani looked at the stone. She looked at Kamari. She looked for a long moment at the daughter who had come, finally late but come. He'd have liked that, she said. Having his name on something useful, he hated waste. She swept the stone with her thumb, the W and the J and the B, the way she always did. All right, Senator, but I'm going to earn it. I don't do it any other way. They built it that summer. It is a modest thing, as these things go. The Walter J. Banks Presence Fund does two plain jobs. It pays and trains visitors, Sunday people, Imani calls them, to sit with residents in nursing homes who have no family on the folder, the bed 19 people, the ones the call buttons blink for at 3 a.m. with nobody coming, and it places a real headstone, with a real name and a real word like father or mother on it, on the county graves of the unclaimed, and it keeps a list, so that no one in the program's reach goes into the ground like they were never here. It did not go smooth, the way nothing real ever goes smooth. Imani did not want a desk. The first week the fund rented 2 rooms above a tax office on Good Hope Road, and somebody ordered her a desk and a chair that cost $300, and Imani stood in the doorway looking at it like it might bite. I've stood up my whole working life, she told Gloria. I don't know how to do a job sitting down. So they put in a standing counter instead, the kind you lean on, and that was better. Imani had spent 31 years being told how the work was done by people who had never once done it, and now she was the one who knew, and it took her a good 2 months to stop flinching when somebody asked her opinion like it counted. Gloria had to learn to follow. She was used to being the most prepared person in any room, and in this room she was not. The first time she ran a training for the Sunday people off a binder she'd made, Imani let her get 4 slides in, then said gently, in front of everyone, "Senator, can I?" and took it from there with no binder at all, just talking, the way she'd talk to a new aide at 3 in the morning. You're not going in there to fix nothing, Imani told the volunteers. You can't fix old. You can't fix dying. All you got to do is be the somebody who's there. Showing up is the whole job. Gloria closed the binder and did not open it again. The first resident the fund matched was a woman named Eunice, 83, in Congress Heights, 4 children scattered across 3 states and not one of them on the folder. The Sunday person they sent was a retired bus driver named Clarence who had lost his wife and did not know what to do with his Sundays, and the match took, the way Imani knew it would, because she had a sense for it now that no binder could teach. By the 3rd visit, Eunice was saving up things during the week to tell Clarence. By the 6th, she was introducing him to the nurses as my Sunday people, plural, though it was just the one man, because that was the program's name and she liked the sound of it. Gloria stood in the hallway that afternoon and understood that she had spent 30 years building things you could count and had never once built a thing you could feel, and that her father, the garbage man, had understood the difference his whole life. There was one match that first winter that Imani took herself instead of handing off. A man named Otis, 79, the bed by the window, 31 years a school custodian, one son who had not called in 9 years over something nobody at the facility could name. Imani sat with Otis on Sundays the way she had sat with Walter. She did not preach to him about his boy. She did not tell him to forgive, and she did not promise the son would come. She just came. On a Sunday in February, Otis told her, the way the old tell you things at the edge of the dark, that he had been a hard father and knew it, and it was too late to be a soft one. Imani held his hand and said the truest thing she knew, which was that it is never as late as you think, right up until it is, and that the only way to find out which one you are in is to pick up the phone. Otis did not pick up the phone, but he died that April with somebody holding his hand, and that, Imani had learned a long time ago, is its own kind of mercy. The kind you can give a person whether or not the world ever fixes the thing that broke them. By the following spring, the fund had placed regular visitors with 41 residents across 3 facilities and had put proper markers on 19 graves that had carried only a plot number. Imani Brooks was its first coordinator. She made $51,600 a year, which was more than twice what Cedarbrook had ever paid her, and the first thing she did with a real wage was nothing flashy at all. She fixed her mother's headstone out at Lincoln Memorial, where 11 years of weather had worn Ruthie's dates faint, and she had them recut, deep, so they would last. There was a Tuesday in August when Gloria brought Imani something out of the drawer she never opened. It was a check dated June of 2004 for $2,000, made out to Walter Banks in Gloria's own hand and mailed back to her unsigned, with 3 words written across it in pencil, in a hand Imani now knew better than she knew her own brother's. I don't take what I haven't earned. Gloria had kept it 22 years like a splinter she could not reach. I used to think it was him being proud just to spite me, she said. I needed it to be about me. It wasn't about me at all, was it? Imani looked at the pencil words a long moment. No, baby, she said. That was just Walter. He'd have sent it back to the Lord himself. And Gloria laughed, a wet sound, the first time she had laughed about her father in 20 years, and something in her that had been clenched since she was 19 let go a half inch and stayed let go. Imani's brothers did not entirely know what to make of any of it. Theo, the younger one, kept calling Gloria your senator on the phone, half teasing, half proud, asking was she sure she wasn't getting used for some campaign thing, and Imani told him no. She was sure and she was. Nobody photographed her. Nobody asked her to talk into a microphone. The work was the same work it had always been, sitting with the ones nobody sat with, except now it had Walter's name on it, and a wage attached and a standing counter instead of a mop, and Imani found, to her own surprise, that she was good at the part she had never been allowed to do, the deciding part, the part where you look at a lonely old man and a lonely retired bus driver and know, the way you know weather, that they will save each other. As for Gloria, the change in her was quieter, and only a few people ever clocked it. She still kept her remarks to the second. She still arrived at 6:40, but she started keeping one Sunday a month blacked out on the schedule with no explanation, and her staff assumed donors or church, and it was neither. It was a flat gray stone and a yellow flower and 11 minutes in the grass beside a woman who had taught her, at 51, the one thing her father had failed to teach her at 19, which was that showing up late is still showing up, and that the only unforgivable thing is to decide a door is closed and never once try the handle again. Gloria kept the brass scale on her desk, the one that balanced, but she set something next to it now. One of the cards from the coffee can, the one she could not stop thinking about, laminated so it would not yellow, in that careful unschooled hand. Cold today. Brought you the marigold instead, the yellow ones were done. Staffers asked about it. She told them it was from a constituent. It was, in the truest sense, the truest thing on the whole desk. And Walter Banks got his wall. The fund's little office on Good Hope Road, 4 doors down from the corner store where the $1.75 flowers were, has a wall by the door where they paint the name of every person the Sunday people have sat with who has since passed, so the names stay said. Walter's is first at the top in gold. Under it, in letters the same size, because Imani insisted they be the same size, it says, Sanitation, City of Washington, 33 years. Sure, father. They dedicated the wall on a Saturday in October, 2 years and 7 months after Gloria first stood at a locked gate at midnight. It was not a press event. Gloria kept the cameras out, which her communications staff did not understand and which she did not explain. About 40 people came. Sutton came in a suit that did not fit him and stood at the back. The choir from Pilgrim Rest sang, and they were not flat. When it came time to speak, Gloria, who had given 1,000 speeches against a clock, found she could not get past the second sentence, and she stood at the front of a small room with her father's name in gold behind her, and let the silence run on past the point any media trainer would have rescued her, and nobody minded, because everyone in that room had a name of their own they were thinking about. Imani said the words instead. She put her hand flat on the wall under Walter's name. My mama used to tell me the dead can't tend to themselves. That's why the Lord left us hands. I didn't know what she meant for about 50 years. She looked around the room. I know now, it just means show up. For the living and the dead both, just show up. Then she sat down. The fund grew the way good small things grow, by word and not by money. A girl named Tasha, 19, the granddaughter of one of the matched residents, signed up to be a Sunday person herself the week after her grandmother passed, because she said somebody had sat with her grandma when she couldn't, and now it was her turn to be the somebody for somebody else. Imani signed her up and thought, but did not say, that this was the part her own mother never got to the end of explaining, the part where the hands keep getting handed down. Imani still goes on Sundays, she still buys the yellow flower. Some Sundays Gloria comes too now, and the two of them sit in the grass for 11 minutes and do not say much. A senator and a cleaner, 4 miles and 20 years and a coffee can of prayers between them, closed now to nothing at all. So here is what I keep turning over, and I want you to turn it over with me before you go. Gloria Banks made it right. She stopped the machine, she built the fund, she put her father's name in gold, and by every measure the world uses she repaid the debt and then some. But her father died believing his daughter had thrown him away, and he died believing it alone, and nothing she did after he was gone ever reached him to tell him otherwise. He never knew. He went into the ground, thinking nobody came. So I'll ask you the thing I can't answer myself. When you make it right with someone only after they're gone, after they can never know you did, is that redemption? Or is it just the living comforting the living? Does a debt count as paid if the one you owed it to never finds out? If this story made you think of a phone call you've been not making, or a grave you've been meaning to visit, or a person you walk past every day and have never once seen, take that with you. And tell me below, honestly, who came when they were supposed to come, and who are you still waiting on? Share this with the one it made you think of. I'll see you next Sunday. There's a line in tonight's story I almost cut. 3 times, actually. I'm still not sure it belongs. It's the one Imani says to Otis, the old man whose son stopped calling 9 years back over something nobody can name. She doesn't tell him to forgive him. She just says it is never as late as you think, right up until it is. I keep coming back to that second half. The right up until it is. Here's the thing. Most of these stories end the way Gloria's does. Somebody comes back, somebody makes it right in time. And I wrote that ending and I believe in it. But Otis didn't get it. His son never called. I left that in on purpose. I think pretending everybody gets the daughter comes home ending is its own kind of lie. I'm at the age where I have names in my phone I keep meaning to dial. I tell myself there's time. I told myself that this morning. So I won't tell you it's not too late. Nobody does. I'll be back next week with another one about somebody the world keeps walking past. But before you close this, is there a name in your phone you keep telling yourself you'll call later?